What are they saying is the number one issue? I mean, is it the violence in the city that's gone off the charts? Is it the cleanliness? Is it gridlock? Is it taxes? What is the number one thing that keeps coming up over and over?
Well, everybody has their own opinion, but I'd say the top three or the top five, and I'd say in order, the number one would be the government waste and corruption and government overreach. The number two thing would be the housing crisis and the livability of Toronto in general, everything becoming more and more expensive to the point where nobody can even afford to live there. And number three would be safety. And not just safety of getting stabbed at the TTC, safety of the children. And this is a huge thing. And I'm talking about Soji. No other candidate will even mention this.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Toronto, and I'm with Chris Sky. And you know, Chris Sky and I, we've had quite the history together. I thought he was one of the most brilliant, outspoken speakers during the pandemic years. You know, remember the Yahoo Nation get-togethers at Queen's Park. And of course, we had a bit of a falling out over an interview. I'll say this, Chris, there's some tweets that you've made in the past I don't necessarily agree with. There's no sense, you know, having an argument about that, because we're going to look towards the future, and your future involves becoming mayor of Toronto. Chris, your election slogan is Chris Sky for Change.
No, it's actually Leadership with Courage.
Oh, okay then. I keep seeing the other one. But
Chris Sky for Change is just the website address.
Got you. But change is the operative word if you got into the top seat at City Hall. What are some of the things you would change right off the bat?
Well, the very first thing I would do is tackle the number one problem in our city, which is the massive amount of waste that the government has been responsible for. And we're not talking about millions, we're talking about in the billions. And once you tackle that waste and you reappropriate those funds, now we actually have money available to make improvements in the city, make improvements in the most vulnerable communities, make improvements in the lives of the people that need it the most. That's the very first thing I would do. And that's the very first tenet of my platform, is to go through the budget and find all that waste and eliminate the wasteful programs, eliminate the wasteful spending, and then reappropriate those funds for things like government housing, for things like mental health programs, for things like job programs, drug rehab programs, to get the most disenfranchised and unfortunate off the streets into a situation where they can get back on their feet so they don't feel like they've been left behind, or worse yet, a burden on society.
And you know, Chris, it seems to me on that platform, you're channeling the late, great Rob Ford. He often said, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. He used to go on John Oakley every Thursday morning with paperwork. One of the most outrageous examples was a $50,000 program to teach homeless people how to stilt walk. I'm not making this up. So definitely there is so much fat to be cut in that budget.
That's 100% true, and Rob Ford said it best: smaller government equals more benefit for society. The bigger your government, the bigger the spending, the bigger the poverty, the longer the lines at the food banks. We already know that. And that's exactly what all these so-called top candidates represent. More of the same, bigger government, more spending, higher taxes, and for even less services in the end. We're the only candidate that actually has plans that will raise revenue for the city. And the only way these politicians know how to raise revenue, because they've never had a real job in their life and never actually made money, is to raise your taxes or to raise fees and levies. We actually have planned to tackle the housing crisis. And at the same time, it's a plan that's going to attract tens of billions of dollars of development into the city. That's how you raise revenue. That's how you create higher GDP. That's how you bring thousands of jobs into the city. That's how you eliminate their $1.5 billion budget deficit projected for the next 3 years, by bringing in real revenue and not by taxing the people or the corporations. And our plan for housing is incredible. We have a way that's going to bring down housing costs, and we have a way to make home ownership a viable option for a lot more people than it is right now. And we're going to do that by streamlining the zoning, development, and building process for high-density residential development. And not talking 15-minute cities here. We're talking about massive infrastructure for car parks that's going to allow for future expansion and progress progress in the city in the way that we want, real expansion. And for these wonderful benefits of the streamlined process that's going to save the developer many months and many millions, which will allow them to build many more units and for a lot cheaper, which both will bring down the housing costs, we will also introduce a rent-to-own program that they will need to participate in that will enable low-income and first-time home buyers to actually become homeowners. And when you give somebody that gift of home ownership and they have something to look forward to, and instead of paying rent every month, they're paying towards their own equity and their own future, that doesn't just work in that one way. They're going to want to save the rest of the money they're making every month because they're actually getting somewhere. They get out of that rat race trap where they're spending every dollar on their rent and using their credit card to buy groceries every month. 30% of Canadians are buying groceries with credit cards, and we have a plan to bring down the food costs exponentially. No other candidate's even thinking about it, let alone talking about it, let alone actually has a plan to do it, and we do.
And it's a big deal, and certainly these are very creative and ambitious plans that you have, Chris, and yet what do you make if the polls are correct? It is indicating that the prohibitive favorite in this 102 candidate race is Olivia Chow. And I've interviewed one of the other candidates who I have a lot of respect for, Rob Davis, and he made the statement to me, if you own a car, if you own a house, Olivia Chow is your enemy, meaning more taxes, more bike lanes, perhaps the Gardiner Expressway coming down.
And 15-minute cities, which is 100% anti-car. I'm the only candidate talking about the 15-minute city, which is a huge deal, and we'll go into that. But if you believe the polls on the mainstream media that we know is funded by our government, that same government that you know lies to you about every single thing they tell you, every single time they talk to you, well, then you're not a very smart person. The mainstream media lies about everything. The mainstream media won't even include me in the polls. They'll say it's because I don't have support. Really? Then how did Olivia Chow have a grand opening just last week, and she had CTV, CP24, CBC, Global News, all broadcasting about it, and she had about 30, 40 people show up? Meanwhile, I'm completely blacklisted off the media. They won't even run my ads on radio, TTC, or buses, yet we're gonna have thousands of people throughout the day here. So how does that make sense that the top candidate, who we all know is against the people, who all the people know is against them, they literally call her the enemy of the people, including the Chinese community, by the way, and somehow she's the top candidate? No, the polls lie. And if you actually look at the polls where they say she's well ahead, they leave out, first of all, they leave me out of it, and then they don't even read to you the last two categories. The last two categories are undecided, which was over 20% of their poll, and the last was other candidate, and that was almost 20%. So you add those two together, and you have 40%, which is higher than Olivia Chow's polling, because everybody with a brain cell left understands that everything the media tells you is lies. And if anybody truly believes that Toronto wants Olivia Chow as mayor, they might as well go get their 7th booster shot.
And Chris, on that note, you've got a wonderful turnout here. Lots of great people have come out. When you approach these people, what are they saying is the number one issue? I mean, is it the violence in the city that's gone off the charts? Is it the cleanliness? Is it gridlock? Is it taxes? What is the number one thing that keeps coming up over and over?
Well, everybody has their own opinion, but I'd say the top 3 or the top 5, and I'd say in order, the number 1 would be the government waste and corruption and government overreach. The number 2 thing would be the housing crisis and the livability of Toronto in general, everything becoming more and more expensive to the point where nobody can even afford to live there. And number 3 would be safety. And not just safety of getting stabbed at the TTC, safety of the children. And this is a huge thing. And I'm talking about SOGI. No other candidate will even mention this. And what's SOGI, everybody? If you don't know, I'm about to tell you. SOGI is the new so-called curriculum that they're slipping into schools under the guise of language arts and physical education. I swear to you. And SOGI stands for sexual orientation and gender identity. So under the guise of language arts and physical education, they are now telling children as young as 8 years old that they have 76 genders and they can choose their pronouns. In fact, they actually make them do exercises where they choose different pronouns and wear pronoun tags for the day to literally transform them into LGBT community members, which is absolutely insane. If a child wants to do that when they become an adult, that's fine. But sexualizing and confusing children and telling children ridiculous untruths like there's 76 genders and you can be called a they or you can choose to be a cat is absolutely ludicrous. And we saw saw it come to a head when the deputy mayor of Toronto, Miss Jennifer McAlvey, whose resignation I'm calling for publicly, actually used our municipal tax dollars at York Mills Collegiate to bring an award-winning drag queen performer to the school, not just to read stories for the children, but to actually perform an exotic dancer-style performance in female risque clothing and a male. If it was a female doing it, we would have to go to a strip club and you'd have to be 19. But if it's a guy doing it, we will pay our tax dollars and the mayor will attend and have these people perform for your children. Well, I got a call from the school from a concerned student. He didn't want his name to be mentioned, and his mother, and I hooked them up with Josh Alexander, and we had a huge protest at the school. It was all on the public. I couldn't be there because I knew they'd use it against me.
We were there.
Yeah, you guys were there,
Yeah.
and you saw how many people showed up.
Yeah.
So you see how many people are against this. And it's not just, it's all the ethnic communities are against this. The ethnic communities are 100% against the idea of sexualizing and confusing children. There is absolutely grotesque books in the school library. One was called Gender Queer, and it literally depicts prepubescent boy-on-boy oral sex acts. I am not kidding you, without censorship. And this book was made available to children as young as 8. And I called the school and I confirmed it was in the library. And then the next day when I called back and tried to record them, they said it wasn't in the library. So I sent a mother to the school, and she actually made a video on Instagram that went viral when she pulled it off the shelf and showed everybody that it is indeed there. And that's just one of these books. And this curriculum already took hold in BC, already starting to get pilot programs in Alberta, and now they're trying to slip it in here. And in this curriculum, not only will they try to confuse your child, they have guidelines to not even tell you about it. So they'll read your little son Johnny a book that says Jack wants to be Jill, and they'll play a game where he pretends to be Jill for the day. And then the next day, if he says, you know what, I had so much fun playing Jill, I want to be called Jill from now on. They will now refer to your son as her, call him Jill, and they will not tell you. They will not ask you for consent. They will not inform you. And then 6 months later, when your kid comes home and says he wants to be called Jill instead of John, and you try to protest it, they're going to call CPS on you, and your child's going to get taken away from you because you're a bad parent who's not affirming your child's gender identity that was implanted in their head by this corrupt school system.
And Chris, on that note, I mean, we've covered this extensively. There are so many school boards out of control. Waterloo, Toronto, Halton,
Even the
Durham,
Catholic ones.
Ottawa, even the Catholic ones, you're absolutely correct. And so many parents ask me, where the hell is the Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, who allegedly is part of a conservative government at Queen's Park? He's nowhere to be found.
He is not a conservative, and this is an agenda that's well above political parties. This is an international agenda being foisted upon Canada, just like the 15-minute cities, and nobody is talking about this. I pointed out a development right on Front Street, and they have these signs going up everywhere. Even in Scarborough, I went by one. They're huge signs that say, City of Toronto rezoning mixed-use development. And this is all the 15-minute city. What's a mixed-use development? Where you have residences, retail, and commercial all in the same building. Why? Because they want you to live upstairs, work downstairs, go to the gym on floor 5, go to Starbucks on floor 6, go to the supermarket on floor 7, and then go back upstairs to where you live. In other words, they want you to live in this building for the vast majority of your life. And for people that say that the 15-minute city isn't about taking away your car, well, I pointed out, downtown Toronto, they have 650 residences in this one building. Then they have hundreds of office spaces and retail spaces, and they have to provide for the surrounding infrastructure. Yet they only have 450 parking spaces. Not even enough parking for the residences. And people will say, oh, that's not so bad. Well, I'm going to show them one that nobody has seen, and I'm going to go there. I want everybody to say it's on Yonge Street. And it's a 500-unit complex, and it's part of the new 15-minute city plan. And this 500-unit complex has one car park and 500 parking for bicycles. So you tell me again if it's a conspiracy theory that they don't want you to have a car. But you're going to be able to buy a condo, you just won't be able to park your car anywhere. Remember 5 years ago when you bought a condo and you would get an option to even have a second parking? Yeah. That's the kind of infrastructure you need in a first world city where you're expanding and you're considering growth. Not putting in infrastructure that has one parking for 500 people and has to supply parking for the surrounding infrastructure. No, they are going out of their way to eliminate cars. Why do you think bike lanes are expanding in areas like Eglinton and Avenue Road? I was there. I made a video. The sidewalk and the bike lane takes up 75% of the road. Meanwhile, while I was standing there, hundreds of cars tried to drive by, squeezing in their single lane. Well, I'm standing in an area where I could be playing baseball, and I'm the only person there. There's not one person on a bike, not one person walking. But we need 75% of the roadway to get rid of the cars? No, this is all part of the plan. And they're already talking about a personal carbon allowance. I tried to warn people that a mayor can do this kind of thing, and they said, no, a mayor doesn't have that kind of power. Well, the mayor of New York just did it. They just passed a law. They're now tracking your grocery purchases for carbon footprint. And now they're already limiting meat at all the public schools and other publicly owned institutions. Everything I tell you is unfolding before your eyes. And coincidentally, they're not talking about this in the debates. Why don't they ask the candidates in the debates about Soji? Why don't they ask them about 15-minute cities? Why don't they ask them about the waste and the corruption? They don't ask them about any of that. They ask them scripted questions with pre-scripted answers, and that's why they will never let me on that debate, because not only will I eviscerate those people on that debate, I will bring up things that they don't want you to know about. They count on your ignorance. They count on your apathy, and I am the one that is educating and inspiring, so I am public enemy number one.
Do you think the establishment and the elites, Chris, they see you as a potential threat?
Potential threat? I am the biggest threat to them. If I wasn't a threat, I'd be on TV. If they thought they could win this election fairly, they'd allow me to advertise. Why isn't the media here today? Why are you the only media here today? You don't think this is media worthy? Like, Olivia Childs is media worthy with 3 people there, and she reads a 3-second scripted line. I'm here to raise your taxes, and everybody cheers for her and left. She cares so little about the people. I went to a mayoral candidate event in Olivia Child's own neighborhood, and she didn't even show up. And everybody was like, why didn't she show up? That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. You know why she didn't show up? Because she knows her NDP supporters are going to vote for her no matter what. So she cares so little about them that she didn't even take the time and effort to go and pay them lip service. So how much do you think she's going to actually represent you when she gets elected? And I have proof of that. What did all these politicians that are now telling you they're going to make your lives better do for you the last 3 years? Every single one of them voted to lock you down. Every single one of them voted to close your business. Every single one of them voted to put a mask on your face, a jab in your arm, and then they exempted themselves from all of those same restrictions. And while you were at your most financial and mentally destitute, they had the audacity of providing themselves not one, but multiple raises. And now they're telling you, give me the keys to the golden city of Toronto and I'm going to make your lives better. We saw exactly what you intend to do to our lives. And who was there fighting for you? Me. The last 3 years, I just beat charge number 72 2 days ago. 72. The one in Edmonton where they arrested me and my wife at the airport to trying to come here to run for mayor. We got arrested at the airport, banned from the airport. I had to drive 3 hours to Calgary, get on a plane, leave my truck there to come here. And sure enough, before I could even go down there for fingerprints, they said, we're not going to drop this and you got to come back for fingerprints. I called them, I said, oh yeah? If you guys make me come there for fingerprints, I'm not going to make a deal after that. I'm going to make it go to trial. And then everybody's going to see the illegal shit you guys are pulling. Wow. And sure enough, I got a call back an hour later. We're withdrawing all charges. And I don't have
Amazing.
to Alberta. Well, so,
Chris,
if you're keeping count, everybody, that's Chris Sakocha, 72, Deep State, 0.
Chris, we're almost out of racetrack here. You've touched on so many subjects. My last question to you, you're surrounded by supporters, but if you come across a Torontonian who is undecided, they don't know who of 102 people to vote for, give me your 30-second elevator pitch why he or she should vote for Chris Sky.
I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. The politicians already showed you what they think of you. They're up here, you're down here. I was down here with you getting arrested 26 times while I fought for you. Well, they did everything to oppress you. Number one, that's the most important aspect of any of this. Why would you vote for another politician when you can vote for a representative of the people? I say it's time to give Toronto back to the people. And if that's not good enough, I just say, here's my cell phone number. It's 416-400-9994. Call me anytime, 21 hours a day. I will answer because I actually care about you. Go ask Olivia Chow or Brad Bradford or any of those people for their direct cell phone number. It's on my campaign material because I will answer for anybody and I will explain why they should vote for me. 21 hours a day because I sleep 3 hours a day because the rest of my life I live fighting evil. Period.
Thanks for your time, Chris. Thank you.
That's the truth, David.
Okay, thank you. Folks, I know you count on Rebel News to bring you the other side of the story you are not going to get from your taxpayer-funded mainstream media. But that's the thing, we need your support. Please go to rebelfieldreports.com. That's rebelfieldreports.com. And if you can make a financial donation, no matter how small, that would be greatly appreciated.